So I think this is an incredibly important topic, and the genesis for this topic really started many years ago when I bought this book called Drone Warfare, which if you're into this subject, I highly recommend it. It's actually been out almost 10 years now, before the Russo-Ukrainian war. And then, of course, if you watch the news for the last 3 years and you've seen what drones are doing on the battlefields in Ukraine, to include that recent incredible attack that they carried off on Russian bombers using drones trucked into Russia. I mean, it's hard to not think that drone warfare has really changed the battlefield, or at least it's changed the way things operate now and things that have to be considered. So anyway, yes, I'm Wayne Shaw. I'm a retired Air Force officer. Probably the closest interaction I had with drones during my active duty career was I was the deployed U.S. CENTCOM electronic warfare officer in the desert at a base that was recently just attacked. And almost every day, the space guys, the U.S. Air Force Space Command guys, would come over and visit me to complain or talk about, how the Reaper or the Predator's link was getting interfered with. And of course, electronic warfare was always guilty until proven innocent. So I would have to walk over to the Silent Sentry site and then, look at the feeds and basically say, yeah, we're not jamming there. So sorry, it ain't us. But anyway, that's probably where my education on drones really came to fruition, was learning about how dependent drones are on the electromagnetic spectrum and the links that both control their flight and also let them send back data, whether that's photos, full mission video, what have you. So that's enough on me. At this point, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Shreya Kakarol. Shreya, you want to say a few words of introduction about yourself?
Sure, thanks, Wayne. Hi, everyone. My name is Shreya. I am based out of India and partially Nepal. I've been working with Frost for over 4 years now, and I've been working in this industry for almost 5 years. My specialization lies mostly in the Asia Pacific region, as well as some sectors within the defense industry in North America. And I'm quite excited about this topic, actually, because with the recent warfare, the India-Pakistan war that recently happened, the use of swarm drones, counter-UAS systems were a big part of the warfare. And now seems like drone warfare is going to be the future of military operations. So this feels like a very timely discussion. I hope you enjoy the webinar. If you have any questions, just let us know.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you. That was a great introduction. Okay, now on to Mike Blades, who is a local legend in the drone industry. So Mike, over to you.
Well, I don't know if it's a legend, but thanks, Wayne. Like Wayne says, I'm Mike Blades. I am a retired Air Force pilot, retired in 2011 and started working for Frost Sullivan in a position similar to Wayne's for nearly 10 years. So I spent that entire 10 years almost working on everything that has to do with drones, market analysis, consulting, forecasting, and uncrewed systems in all domains and for all use cases and for military, commercial, civil. I really enjoyed doing that, but I kind of wanted to get out and actually get hands-on and make some differences, because when I left Frost Sullivan, there's kind of an inflection point in the drone market where we're starting to get some regulations and some waivers and some things that we're moving the space along, and I kind of wanted to be in it as it grew. So I went to work for Drone Up, who was putting together Walmart's drone delivery ecosystem. That they have pivoted from that now. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but I spent 2 years there, and then I've spent the last over 2 years at Alcor Tech. And Alcor Tech is a small business in Virginia that has some excellent products that we produce. Basically, any power electronics for electric or hybrid electric aircraft, we make, design, and manufacture. We're on several projects for the DoD right now. So my job is to sell more of those things to more people. I'm head of business development there. So that's it about me. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Yeah, that's great that you're, boots on ground, kind of hands-on keyboard, hands-on controller, doing real stuff with drones, not just researching and writing about it like me and Shreya. So the closest I've gotten is I'm still working on earning my Part 107 small UAS remote operator license from the FAA. I still got a ways to go on that. Well, anyway, let's get on to the meat of the webinar. Drones have been around for years, right? I mean, this drone warfare book that I've read, goes back to World War One. And as far back as the 1960s, we used drones to help artillery improve their targeting, and they acted as decoys. They did ISR. We used old Firebee drones to lay chaff, I know, in the opening of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. We used Predators for the first time 30 years ago in Operation Deliberate Force when I was flying EF-111s over Bosnia-Herzegovina. So what's the big deal, in terms of the changes that drones have brought to warfare? Is it the scale of them? Is it the scope of them? Is it the fact that now we have these kamikaze drones? What's really essentially changed with drone warfare, in our era? Any thoughts from any of the panelists? Mike, I'll start with you.
Oh, you're gonna start with me. Okay. Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think just from my time in the industry, so I guess I can go back 15 years. The focus on drones was surveillance and reconnaissance, right? There was very limited strike, and that changed over the years. And then when we did have strikes, we were kind of taking a sledgehammer to an ant. It was firing very, very large destructive weapons at small targets. And so I think we've progressed in the technology that has allowed us to do that, to where we're now able to produce relatively inexpensive drones, and then also smaller drones. When I left Frost Sullivan, the last few years I was at the company, the big focus, and I kept hearing this in the DoD, was let's take the manned out of unmanned, because you had over 100 people to populate a cap. Even though there was nobody flying inside the drone, there was a bunch of people on the ground. So there's been a lot of movement towards reducing that logistical tail, putting a lot of Group 4 and Group 5 capabilities in Group 3 aircraft. So get capabilities under control, where we're actually taking the drone or the things that make a drone having worthwhile. Let's make those actually work. Let's make it so that you do can reduce the manpower to operate them. You do get all the benefits of using a drone instead of, okay, now it's uncrewed and it's working out and doing its thing, but then there's a bazillion people back, in support. So I think we've moved from that, and I think we are also learning the lessons of asymmetric warfare, where in Afghanistan and Iraq, we saw very small drones, that were, like homemade DIY stuff that were dropping, like grenades on tanks, and you have a $1,200, $2,000 piece of machinery taking out a multi-million-dollar weapon. So I think we are finally, at least in the U.S., thinking through things about let's plan for the next war, not the last war, like we've done so many times in the past. And so I think the path forward is, and I think we talk about this more in other topics later, but I think the path forward is we develop more capabilities on the uncrewed side, so we can take our personnel and let them do other things and also keep them out of harm's way. So, I mean, I think that's what I think, like I said, we get more into later specifics, but the drone market itself, at least from the military standpoint, I think we can separate that out from commercial, is very much transitioning to more drones, more automation, and fewer pilots and people in aircraft, and then also fewer support personnel.
Yeah, that's an incredibly great point, Mike. In a previous life, I was a Navy weapons school instructor, went on to Nellis Air Force Base quite a bit. And on one of those trips, I was invited to go up to Creech Air Force Base and visit the Predator operation there. And you're right, even though the Predator itself had no one inside it, it was, I mean, there was an entire squadron infrastructure there at Creech, and there were 2 guys always in the control station. And the pilot back then, a lot of times, was a no kidding Air Force pilot who had been pulled out of an A-10 or pulled out of an F-16 to fly a Predator for 3 years. And you can imagine how career enhancing and satisfying that was for an F-16 pilot. So you're right. One of the big moves that needs to happen is a lot less manning and on the logistics tail side to be able to employ these drones truly autonomously. Shreya, did you have any thoughts on that first overhead question?
Yes, just to add another component to it. So in terms of like human capital, what we are seeing on a global scale is the decline of human population, especially in the Asia Pacific. We've already seen South Korea, Japan struggling to meet their population growth. So in the next 20 to 30 years, the main issue that could arise is the availability of human capital, even for military operations. So drones, robotics, and automation, it's not just in terms of technology advancement, it becomes a necessity to future-proof your military operations. So yeah, just to add another dimension that this is going to be the way of the future. Like there's going to be development for sure, but unmanned systems and drones, they're not going to go away. They are just going to go up and up and up from here. So it's going to be interesting to see how the landscape develops over time.
If I can jump in there, that's an excellent point, because I think we're seeing maybe a less interest in being in the military. I think some of the newer generation, especially here in the U.S., maybe aren't as jazzed about joining the military as you know, some preceding generations. And so, you know, if we have to shrink our personnel, then drones obviously act as a force multiplier. And I also, to add to what we sort of started on earlier, is that, you know, we have those drone capabilities, and we talked about the MQ-9s and doing all this. And I think what we're going to see is a movement towards a more tactical approach, where you have smaller drones with smaller units, because that's how warfare is going to be in the future. You're not going to have these big, huge, you know, areas of responsibility. You're going to have, you know, more small, you know, concentrated conflicts that are, you know, more supported by the tactical capabilities of smaller drones and you know, man packable, man portable, whatever, smaller type of solution.
Yeah, I think you're driving at some of the points we're going to make, I think, a little bit later in the think tank, about how it's not so much air power or a change in air power. It's more about just effects-based operations, and the small drone is just a way to achieve the desired effect, but it's not really air power per se. So yeah, you know, Shreya, you were talking about the growth and how it's really it's going to be interesting how things change. Just very recently, President Trump signed 2 executive orders that are all about the drone industry. And they're really going to push the drone industry forward, I think. You know, one of the orders is called Unleashing American Drone Dominance. And it focuses on fast tracking the beyond visual line of sight rules and supporting U.S. drone companies by making U.S. federal agencies prioritize buying from them versus an overseas vendor. And then the other executive order is called Restoring American Airspace Sovereignty, and its main focus is on sort of the flip side, counter-UAS, and keeping the skies safe from hostile drones. You know, so a couple of the takeaways from those 2 drone executive orders from the White House: you know, accelerated BV loss, beyond visual line of sight operations. And, you know, the FAA is normally not known for moving quickly on things. They've been told that they have to come up with at least a draft order within 30 days, and then a final order rule within 240 days. And then there's a new federal task force that's going to develop ways to track and mitigate rogue drones. And then state and local law enforcement are going to get grants and new tech to help them spot unauthorized drones. And also a new training center is going to be created for counter-UAS equipment. So, I mean, pretty significant push with what the President of the United States is allowed to do, you know, issuing these executive orders, really pushing drones forward. And I don't know, you know, if you guys watch, you know, the stock market very much, but like AeroVironment, they just recently went through the roof in terms of their stock price. I missed it by that much in terms of investing in them. Now they're too expensive. But so any thoughts on those two executive orders that have just come out? What they might mean for drone warfare anyway?
Talking about the first executive order about drone dominance, I
Dominance,
forget it.
drone dominance. Brr.
Yes, so I think that's going to be very important because that's going to promote the commercial sector of drone adoption. And that's going to be very important to foster timely innovation in the military industry. So if we are to look at Asia Pacific as best practices, India is one of the best case studies where you can see this synergistic relationship between the commercial drone sector as well as the military drone sector. So in India, the commercial sector has really been open to adopting drones in their operations. So you see some of the top sectors being agriculture, monitoring and evaluation in agriculture, spraying of pesticides and things like that. You see it in healthcare with the use of large logistic drones to transport necessary health facilities as well as the medicines and certain necessities to these geographically remote places during emergencies as part of humanitarian actions. And another big sector is last mile delivery for the e-commerce sector. So what this essentially does is, as the commercial sector also starts to invest more in drone technology, it is going to make it very cost effective for the military to take the commercial off-the-shelf products and modify them according to the needs in the military. So US, I think it's taking steps in the right direction, but there's definitely catching up to do with the rest of the world.
Yeah. So yeah, you brought up one point I wanted to kind of highlight. Frost and Sullivan recently just published a report on using drones for agriculture. Now that actually has been around for a long time. The Japanese, I think, really charted that path. At first, like back in the early 90s, they had little helicopters that would spray fields with pesticides and so forth. But anyway, we recently just published an entire report, and I was surprised when I read it because I had to review it, right? How many companies are involved in that space? Like here in the United States, there's a company called Ag Eagle that makes a drone that kind of flies along, and it has sensors that can detect areas that are short on, are dehydrated or infested or, diseased and all that kind of stuff. So really exciting developments in terms of these drones being able to carry all these like multispectral sensors and help farmers figure out where they need to water more, where they need to spray more, spray less, all that kind of stuff. Mike, did you have any thoughts on those executive orders, like the Part 108, Beyond Visual Line of Sight?
Oh yes, coming from the commercial space with Drone Up, we dealt with this a lot. So my first thought on both EOs is I think it's a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, we've had legislation before that has laid out plans for the FAA to have certain stuff done by certain times, and it hasn't happened. So, and like you said, it's not. I don't think it's completely the FAA's fault. Historically, they've been underfunded and undermanned, and if you think about all the things that they're tasked with doing with inspections and regulatory, follow-ups and this and that, and I mean, it's gotten to the point where they've had to allow some of the companies that make the aircraft, like Boeing and others, to do their own, not qualification, but do their own studies and reports to make sure that they're in line with what they need to be doing instead of having the FAA inspector do it. So
yeah.
I don't completely blame the FAA, but I would like to see action follow to sort of make sure, because BV loss is huge, right? I mean, you have to have BV loss rules in place to get to act to be able to enact any kind of operations at scale. And that's really the only way on the commercial side that you're going to be able to, beat the electric truck that delivers things. I mean, the idea is twofold. One, you want to be cheaper than that. And two, you want to take some things that are on the road off the road, right? So reduce traffic and enable more deliveries or whatever it is you're doing with the commercial drones To me, delivery is kind of the most difficult use case because of all the things you have to do. You can take off and go do a perimeter search or reconnaissance, and for security or whatever, pretty fairly easily. It's much more difficult to take a package, put it on a drone, take it somewhere, drop it off, and come back. So when the BVLOS rules are in place and we know what we need to have in order to have something that can be airworthiness certified, get those things up in the air, and they're actually treated like all other aircraft. You have a low altitude air traffic control system that's should be automated. Everything's communicating with each other, remote ID. We have all that stuff in place. Now we have an industry, and that's what we really need to look forward to. So I hope that EOs are not laws, they're not enforceable, but it shows an intent to make these things happen. And so I hope that gets followed up on. I hope we get something solid from a Part 108 soon. And there is a drone, the FAA drone and AAEM symposium is next week. So it'd be kind of cool if we heard some more updates from that progress. But really, those kind of things have to happen in order for us to have a market. Actually, in both those EOs, to have a market for the commercial drones, to be able to scale and be profitable, and also for the counter-UAS systems, we have to have something in place that says you can use them here, there, for this reason and that reason, and then people will have more capability to say, okay, now we have an opportunity to purchase these things because now we know how we can employ them.
Yeah, well, I mean, that executive order makes it pretty clear the FAA is under a pretty tight timeline to propose a draft rule that everybody can comment on. And then I believe the executive order said they have 240 days to put a final rule in place. So, I mean, your Amazon packages may be coming to your door via a quadcopter here pretty soon. Pretty exciting.
Well, unfortunately, we've had legislation that has put those timelines in before, and they've just kind of come and gone. So hopefully this EO puts some fire behind that, right?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, Shreya, go ahead.
Yeah, just something to add on the action part of it. So I think 2 days ago, they released this news where a US-based company, it's called Arrive AI, and an Indian-based company called Sky Air Mobility. So they've entered this synergistic partnership where they are going to be exploring last mile delivery for commercial use. So this whole partnership with allied countries, technology transfer share that's going to be happen through these partnership. It's going to, first of all, obviously help with technology advancement, but at the same time, and most importantly, what it is going to do is strengthen the supply chain that has been disrupted since COVID pandemic happened, and we're still trying to recover from that. So that would be the whole growth of commercial sector. I think that's going to be a big part in strengthening the supply chain, which is going to translate into positive impacts for the defense industry.
Yeah, I know, you're right. No, you're exactly right. Well, Mike, you sort of provided a good segue for my next question. Part of the one of the executive orders was all about the kind of the flip side, counter UAS. And as a good former electronic warfare officer, I'm always thinking about the offense but also the defense. So currently in the U.S., the authority to engage drones with any kind of counter UAS tech resides at the federal level, with either the DoD, Department of Homeland Security, and then the FAA having final authority for testing, and the DOJ with the authority to actually enforce laws, of course. Do you think this is just sort of a question for discussion, do you think this needs to be lowered to the states? I mean, I live here in Texas, and the state is the size of France, right? And Texas has no actual inherent authority to use counter-UAS systems to protect, say, a football game with the Dallas Cowboys. Many thousands of people come to those football games. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on that?
Well, so we run into a little bit of a problem here. I think it's okay to keep it at the federal level. I kind of like to think about this as, what if we treat the states like the EU treats countries, right? So we have Part 107, we want a Part 108 that stipulates what you need to have in place and what qualifications you have to meet or whatever to fly BVLOS,
Right. Right.
That you want that rule to be homogenous across states. So you don't take a drone operation and that starts in Texas, and then you say, "Oh, I'm going to expand to Louisiana," and now you have all these different rules that you have to abide by. So I think you get into a potential for a conundrum when if you have a bunch of states that have a bunch of different rules. It kind of like the EU. The EU has a homogenous set of rules for operating drones. That way, if you take your drone from France to Spain or something, everything's still the same if you want to operate it there, just like the euro money itself, right? So what I think we need is a regulation for the counter UAS that is sort of like part 1A, where it outlines here's what you need to have in order to function in a certain, for a certain time, for a certain place. Here's the sensors you can use, whether or not you can use sensor fusion. So, I mean, just lay out those stipulations and say, here's how you can employ, here's what you can employ, here's how you can employ it, and let the states decide when and where they use it, just as long as they're meeting the federal regulations. I don't have a problem with that because I think it keeps everything to where if you sell a system to a company in one state, you can use that system in another state because it still meets the same rules and you can employ it the same way. So, I'm all for states' rights, but to me, it unleashes more problems than it solves if you allow the states to make their own rules.
Yeah, no, that's true. Shreya, did you have anything on this? If not, I have a follow-on question.
Well, not really.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I'm just wondering how DoD or DHS would be able to provide counter UAS either systems and then of course operators to operate those systems at like all the major sporting events, wherever critical infrastructure, all that kind of stuff. So, but I guess maybe that could be National Guard, Air National Guard, reserve that takes care of stuff within their local area and their state. Or maybe we just decide, to go with assumed risk and we don't worry about counter UAS systems for, say, the Super Bowl or, NBA championship or something like that. Well, a follow-on question I had, is that recent, very innovative Ukrainian attack deep inside Russia on the 1st of June with the semi-truck delivered drones, which apparently destroyed at least 13 Russian strategic aircraft like Tu-95 Bears and Tu-22 Blackjacks. Surely that sort of ups the ante on needing counter UAS protection for strategic assets in every nation, to include their populations, what their populations depend on most, like reliable sources of food and water and electricity and transportation and on and on. So, even here in the U.S., it seems like that, by the time the states wait for federal agencies to provide counter UAS tech, it's going to be too little too late. But any thoughts on that, Mike or Shreya?
Okay, I'll start, I guess. Well, so I think the Ukraine attack opened some eyes. I don't know that it's a new idea. I just think it was really well executed. I read I can't remember if I read it or read about it. There was a novel once where the plot was taking cars that come in on container ships, and when they get driven to somewhere, they all have bombs in them and they explode, kind of thing. So it's sort of that same idea. But I think you can have, so the Ukraine attack was unique because it's your next door neighbor, right? You can plan something like this tactically because you're close in proximity. The same kind of attack wouldn't work, say, if we wanted to, send something into an adversary, because we don't have any adversaries to our north and south, but everybody else is across the ocean. So we'd have to have some sort of delivery capability or deep strike or something like that. So I think the same kind of idea could be that we use a large aircraft to deliver smaller aircraft, and the large aircraft would serve as the Ukrainian truck. So there's an operational potential for us to do that sort of same tactical attack. But to your point, we also need the protection from that kind of attack. So I think unfortunately right now, unless I'm missing out on some technology, I did one of the first counter-UAS reports ever, I think in 2015 for Frost Sullivan. It was maybe 6 or 8 companies that were making solutions. And I'm like, well, as the drone market increases, so will the need to counter them. So
right.
that's when we started doing some reports on that, and it's just grown ever since. And then, you know, it's every single sensor you can think of, RF and EOIR and radar, and sometimes they're all fused together. And then there's high power microwaves for mitigation, and there's kinetic mitigation. So that's why, again, I think we go back to, although we do need to protect ourselves in the U.S., and other countries need the ability to protect themselves from drones as well as they proliferate, you still need to have some sort of guidelines for how to use those. Or you could take out a electric grid or something to use high power microwave against a small little drone. So I think it's going to take a while to figure out what that is. But I think that market grows. I think that I don't know if there's ever gonna be a silver bullet, but I think there's gonna be a lot of work on trying to figure out what the best solution is from a single multi-sensor system, and then those will be deployed quite a bit. And I also think that we're gonna have a lot more capabilities sitting at a critical infrastructure and on bases, and probably operated by more professional folks than will be from the commercial side, where they really don't need as much technology to counter the small drones, and that would be more of a threat to them than, say, a military attack.
Yeah, I know. Back in like 2016, I helped author one of the very first counter-UAS ConOps that we wrote at a classified facility here in San Antonio. And I know now Northcom, U.S. Northcom, and U.S. Indo-PACOM are partnered and working the counter-UAS, at least for like base defense and that kind of thing, and military defense, very hard. And I also know there's a ton more companies now that are providing counter-UAS solutions. And then, of course, the Russians recently showed us another kinetic option, which is to throw rocks at the drones. We hadn't thought of that one. There was a recent article in the Air and Space Forces magazine, a great article by John Turpak, who's written a lot of great stuff over the years, about what the real lessons learned were from that very innovative raid that the Ukrainians carried out in Russia. And I thought General Deptula had some great comments about how we need to get back to effects-based operations, with aerospace objectives, air objectives in mind. A lot of European nations have been releasing drone strategy documents. The only one that I've actually read is the one that was released in January by Finland. It was released in late January, and it had the stated aim of Finland becoming the world leader in drone innovation. And of note, I was on an Aviation Week webinar not too long ago, and they showed a slide that showed that European nations are spending more on defense than the U.S. For the first time since like before World War II, something like that. 170.1 billion versus 167.7 billion, U.S. versus Europe. Those two facts would suggest that Europe's going to take the lead on the development of drone technology as well as counter drone defense. Do you guys think that the U.S. is going to lose the race to develop the next generation of drone technology and counter UAS technology? What do you guys think about that? I know, Trey, you recently did a Frost & Sullivan report on U.S. foreign military sales. Does that provide any insight to you maybe on that question?
Yes. So right now, at least in the eastern side of the world, what is happening is a shift towards self-reliance, which is why countries, some of these emerging defense nations like India, South Korea, Australia, Japan, even Singapore, they've started promoting domestic procurement. For instance, in India's annual defense procurement budget, 60% is reserved specifically for domestic procurement. So because of the shift we are seeing towards self-reliance, first of all, for economic prosperity, as well as in interest of national security, we will definitely see a lot more competition on the international scale when it comes to arms transfer for drones. When it comes to like small drones, I think these nations, like their first priority was developing these small drones for target, for reconnaissance, ISR purposes, and that's been really effective. We see a lot of these SMEs and startups emerging that are catering to loitering munitions and the small drone market. So for the US to be competitive through foreign military sales, at least for drone warfare, it's going to be a bit tricky. But when it comes to the question of how, if US is losing, I don't think the US is losing yet, but US definitely needs to take more strategic and diplomatic relationships to expand the military production and strengthen the supply chain diversification. Because again, if the supply chain is not good, then it really does not matter the amount of contracts you get. You need to be able to timely deliver them, right? So right now they're looking for cost-effective solutions and faster production to field deployment, and that's where these emerging defense nations like South Korea and India are taking over slowly, and the products that they're giving out in the market, they are considered to be increasingly more and more attractive compared to the US products. But at the same time, I would say the bilateral relationships the US has been forging, let's again, just to stick with the Asia Pacific region for now, with India, IndusX, through the IndusX initiative, we have one of the biggest manufacturers of drone, the General Atomics. So they signed a deal with India to supply around 31 MQ-9B Reaper drones. But one of the conditions for the acquisition was that the General Atomics, they partner up with one of the local partners, local companies in India, to establish, first of all, the assembly of the Reaper drone, which brings down the cost. And at the same time, what they've done is they're in the process of establishing an MRO facility, which is going to ensure that all the MRO related to the MQ-9B drone is going to be carried out in India. So this is going to make sure that supply chain is strengthened, and as well as India has a lot of resources. India has better, I would say, more diplomatic relation with countries like Russia, which the West has deemed to be their adversaries, and as a result, they've boycotted Russian products. But with India, because of its geostrategic location, they will be able to use, not, I wouldn't say use, but they would be able to refer to Russian products to and add value by assembling them in India and supplying them to the US and the West. So that's where the whole trajectory is heading. I think US is going to benefit a lot from these bilateral relationships through technology transfer. So I think in 5 years' time, we will be able to come up with a more definitive answer as to whether US is losing this drone development competition or not.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't know that. That's very insightful. And, MRO, maintenance, repair, overhaul, that's big business. So that's great that there's going to be Reaper MRO facilities in India. And then based on the border of India with the various nations that border it, very mountainous. So it'll be it'll be good for the Reapers to be able to do those kind of missions, to patrol those areas. I mean, we proved how useful the Reaper was in particularly in Afghanistan. Mike, did you have any thoughts about, are we losing the drone race? Is the U.S. going to lose the drone race?
Well, I think depends on what you talk about. From a military perspective, well, let's go commercial first. I think we already lost a drone race to DJI quite a long time ago for the small commercial drones, which is why every commercial drone you see now is trying to do something else besides what DJI does really well. Although it'd be interesting to see what happens in the future with potential bans on Chinese products and things like that. But from a military standpoint, I don't know that we're losing ground. I don't think the isolationist kind of policies that we're having tariff-wise are going to help. If some of our closest allies, Europe and Asia Pacific that Shreya discussed, if they're having to pay a bunch of extra money for products that they can make themselves, they may want to focus on their own, internal capabilities. There's plenty of, especially in Europe. I mean, you have companies like Robin Radar, Rheinmetall, Saab, Cerber in France, Chess Dynamics. All these companies make counter drone solutions, and you know, in fact, some of them are partnered with U.S. companies to provide sensors into the multi-sensor, you know, counter-UAS systems. So I think if there's an idea that they're going to have to go on their own from a defense standpoint, they're going to do it while using their own products, unless there's just something that's incredibly, it's a much better product than what they can make, which I don't think. The Robin radar is like a really good radar, and I think that's the Netherlands. But hopefully we can sort of get beyond this and get to more of a collaborative thing where both our partners and the U.S. Benefit from putting together systems that work the best and then using them, in concert with each other. And that way you can also support it easier, right? You have parts, you're kind of using the same parts, you're using the same sensors, using the same, software, whatever. And it's easier to maintain, easier to improve, easier for upkeep. But right now I think it's at a status quo. But I think that if we kind of keep it with these isolationist policies and having these reciprocal tariffs and stuff, and it costs more for our partners to buy stuff from us, then they're almost forced to make their own stuff. And so it starts skewing towards them. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but if that's the trend, I think that's the way it's going to go.
Okay. Hey, well, thank you. Very insightful, Mike. So a LinkedIn contact of mine who I've talked to back and forth a few times, Dr. Dominika Kunurtova. She wrote an article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientist a couple years ago, and she talked. This is when she was at ETH Zurich in Zurich, Switzerland, that university where Einstein used to teach. And she wrote about the value of drone diversity in accomplishing military missions. Appears to be among the critical emergency technology lessons of the Ukrainian war. Adopting a comprehensive approach to drones that includes cost-efficient anti-drone defenses will be an enduring lesson for militaries, policymakers, and industry. We've already really talked about counter-UAS quite a bit, but I'm wondering what the panel thinks about the whole concept of drone diversity, and as far as that in regard to accomplishing military missions. Some drones are not cheap. The Predator is retired. The Reaper is not cheap. The Global Hawk is not cheap. But then thousands and thousands of smaller drones are not cheap either. Can the militaries afford all these different types of drones, or do we need to kind of pare it down to just a few in like each group or something? Any thoughts on that, panel?
I can add something to that.
Okay,
So,
Shreya, go.
not specific to drones itself, but what we are seeing right now globally is this shift towards interoperability between allied nations. So in terms of like the whole like drone diversity thing, I don't know if this really ties up. I'm trying. Could you first clarify exactly what you mean by drone diversity? Are we talking in terms of commercial applications as well, and the importance of
No.
that?
All within military, all within the drone warfare kind of construct.
Right. So right now, what we are seeing is this prioritization of modular technologies that's been explored all across DoD industries. And I'm not sure if it's really caught on to the drone sector yet, but with the whole defense industry shifting towards more cost-effective and scalable solutions, modular technologies are definitely going to be a big game changer. So modular payloads, that's going to address multi-missions. I think that's where the industry is headed, but I'm quite not sure if the US or anywhere in the globe we've seen the application of modularity yet. But I'm sure like behind closed doors, I'm sure they have been exploring that for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, Shreya. Very insightful, as always. Mike, did you have any thoughts on the drone diversity question from Dr. Kunurtova?
Yeah. I think the doctor had a great point. So if you think about it just from an aviation standpoint, we have cargo planes, we have tanker planes, we have, transport aircraft, fighter aircraft. So we have aircraft diversity, right? I think you have to have that same thing in drones. Now, Treya hit the nail on the head. If you want to get the maximum use out of your drones, you need modularity. I think modularity is the key to everything in the future. If you have a tactical team with a drone that they can throw in a backpack and they have 4 or 5 different payloads, whether they be EOIR payloads to go do recce, or whether they be attack payloads because they have to take out a tank or whatever, you want to be able to do that with one drone. You don't want to have 10 drones to do 10 missions, right? So I think the diversity from my perspective is having different kind of drones. You have a tactical drone that can be used for many things. You have, say, a very small tactical drone. Then you can have a medium-sized tactical drone that can do deliveries of forest supplies, things like that. And then you have the large drone that, like the Group 4, Group 5 drone that can give you strategic, sort of battle space awareness, because it flies high and for a long time. And then you can also use that same drone as potentially as like a mothership to bring in, again, act as the truck that they use in Ukraine to bring in smaller drones. Maybe there's 20 or 30 FPVs on there. And then that mothership acts as the comms to all those FPV drivers, and they're all going to a different target. So I think you have to have drone diversity, but I think all of those drones need to be designed so that they have modular capabilities. So they're not one trick ponies. So, I mean, that's how I see it. Drone diversity. I think it's necessary. And I think that's the way that things are moving forward.
Yeah. There's probably lessons we can learn from the manned aircraft history too, on trying to, avoid one trick ponies and try to design, say, a fighter that can do a lot of things, like the F-16. It can do air to air, it can do air to ground, it can do CAS, lots of close air support, that is. So I have some more prepared questions, but I want to make sure we get to some of the questions coming in from the Zoom world and the LinkedIn world. One of the questions we have that's come in is, hello, panelists. I wanted to ask you, how do you see the OEM and MRO space shifting with regard to drones for defense? So we're not talking commercial drones, just like military drones, and OEM and MRO space. Shreya, you sort of hit on how the Indians agree or made sure that General Atomics was going to let them do the manufacturing and the MRO work in India. Maybe you lead off on this one, since you've sort of already hit on it a little bit.
Right. So there's no doubt that some of these biggest players in the drone industry, so if in 2024, the 3 major companies that were awarded prime contracts for drones, and this is including MRO as well, they were General Atomics, Boeing, and Northrop. So there's no doubt that these conglomerates, these large defense companies are, they're still going to be the recipients of prime contracts. But I feel like what these large companies have also started to realize is, again, comes down to the whole supply chain diversification and strengthening of supply chain. And the Russo-Ukrainian crisis put more pressure on the supply chain after it was slowly recovering after the COVID pandemic. What we would see, my speculation is that for US-based companies, for them to be more competitive globally, they will definitely be expanding MRO capabilities to allied nations. And we are already seeing that on the naval front. So US naval ships deployed in the Indo-Pacific region, South Korea, Japan, and India, they've already signed partnerships to conduct MRO on those naval ships. Similarly, with General Atomics already establishing an MRO facility in India, that's going to be just first of its kind. There's going to be an expansion depending on the success. And I do believe that it's going to be a very successful venture. What this basically does, it brings down the cost for US-based companies, and they also have access to the untapped resources. That's not just the raw materials, but also the labor that goes into the MRO process, that it becomes more cheaper for US companies to outsource these to allied nations. So I think that's where the whole direction of US drones, MROs is going to head towards in the future, maybe in the next 7 to 10 years.
Okay, very insightful, Shreya. Thank you so much. Mike, you got any thoughts on OEM and MRO shifts?
I think I have more thoughts on OEM than MRO. I
Okay,
think
that's
from an
fine.
OEM perspective, and this is just from my recent exposure because of what my company Alcor Tech does is I've seen a lot of interest in well, there's a couple of things that are driving our market right now. One is the tactical kind of delivery drone, being able to take goods from shore to ship to ship, something that's, can carry 100, 300 pounds. And you soon have to fly a very expensive helicopter out to that ship or from into that forward area or whatever. The second thing we're seeing a lot of is interest in attritable drones, which are both things we've been talking about. Now, when you talk about these kinds of drones, these aren't the kind of drones that your Boeings and your General Atomics and whatnot make. There's a lot of opportunity for like medium-sized OEMs. The companies we work with, like Griffin Aerospace and
Oh yeah, Griffin.
and Skyways and some of these other companies, they're not huge, but they're large enough to have a really professional team and really smart, and they can get things done quite a lot faster than some of these very large corporations that have a lot of red tape and a lot of overhead and this and that. So I think as we move towards this drone diversity we're talking about, I think we're going to see a lot more opportunities for these medium-sized OEMs. I mean, the big players will always be there and probably end up acquiring some of these companies that we're talking about. But
Yeah.
as we move towards this drone diversity that we talked about, I think that we're gonna see a lot more medium-sized companies be the big players in the OEM space.
Yeah, I
Um,
was. Oh, sure. You had a follow on. Go
oh,
ahead.
yes. Sorry, yeah, just to add on to the whole MRO aspect as well. There are things or initiatives that are taking place that is going to overall make the MRO process more efficient and more cost effective, and that includes investments in these advanced cutting edge technologies like artificial intelligence. We have additive manufacturing or 3D printing. We're also seeing a lot of investments in R&D for digital twin. So these all investments that are happening simultaneously, it is all going to lead to a more effective MRO process where the use of these cutting edge technologies is going to negate human error as well as reduce downtime for these active vehicles or vessels that are deployed. And I keep mentioning about this cost-effective scalability as well as this need for quicker production to field deployment. And all of these investments in these small sectors that maybe usually go unnoticed, this will all lead to a bigger picture where, most importantly, it's going to be cost-effective, and nations and nations and operators will be able to reduce the downtime, and that itself is going to give a big strategic advantage to any nations operating drones. So that's where I feel the MRO landscape is heading towards. And this is not just exclusive to drones. We're seeing it in manned aircraft as well. We're seeing it in the naval sector as well. And slowly we're also seeing this convergence of these two to make sure that the commercial side is able to supply certain parts and components that will eventually help with the drone MRO. So just to like add something on the MRO side. Yep,
Yeah,
that's all.
yeah, that's great. There's a company called iBase-T that I met at an MRO conference back in April, and they have a software called Solumina, and it actually helps optimize your MRO process flow and everything. And since, I mean, drone MRO facilities aren't necessarily starting from a blank piece of paper because we've been doing MRO on manned aircraft for many years, but still there will be some differences, right? The little SATCOM dishes up in the dome and, different, the sensor package, and, there are things that are unique to an MRO or a drone. So anyway, that could be a great way for some of these drone MRO facilities to maybe get a leg up right off the bat and try to optimize their flow of the drones through their facility as fast as possible. Well, yeah.
One last thing.
Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead,
one
Shreya.
last thing I would like to add is also this investment in augmented reality and virtual reality. So within US itself, I think there's this organization or a platform called Microsoft I forget the name, but basically what that does, it brings together academia as well as the private sector, and it does a lot of research in the metaverse sector. So that includes augmented reality and virtual reality as well. So those glasses that you see,
Right,
the
right, right.
sensitive gloves that you see, I think that is also going to open up new opportunity for US based OEMs as well as MRO operators, in the sense that let's say say South Korea bought some drones from the US and they need MRO facilities, but using these devices like AR, VR in conjunction with digital twins, what we could see in the future is operators, technicians based in the US. They'll be able to use these features and they'll be able to analyze the drones that are deployed or grounded in South Korea, and they'll be able to carry out MRO functions remotely as well. So that is another big opportunity I think we could see the US capitalize on eventually as well. So
Huh. Very interesting.
think
I don't know. How do you remotely turn a wrench? Would that be would they use a robot or something to do some of those MRO functions?
I
They're
think
wearing
so, but
they're wearing the glasses somewhere outside, but the facility, but then they're like directing a robot to turn the wrench or, change the part or whatever.
I think mostly eventually it will begin with just technical expertise. So let's say General Atomics, they have their own set of engineers and technicians for MRO, right? Flying them out to South Korea, since we're using the same example, flying them out to South Korea and carrying out the MRO operation may be more cost effective as well as time consuming. But with the use of those devices, what they can do is give the technical expertise and analysis from the US and convey that to the other technicians in South Korea, let's say. And that's going to help, first of all, with the transfer of technical expertise. And at the same time, it will also create job opportunities as well as growth expansion opportunities for OEMs and MROs. So I think eventually we'll start with just like giving instructions to humans operating in another country to carrying out the MRO process. But eventually we will definitely see the use of more robotics and automation in carrying out those duties in the future, maybe 10 years down the line.
Okay. Well, it's actually we're out of time, but I want to get to this question that came in from the LinkedIn world. We're being watched out there in LinkedIn. It's live streaming on the LinkedIn platform. If I were going to invest $1,000 in one drone company that will grow as a result of the changes you've discussed, which one would you pick and why?
Wow, what a good question.
A capitalist, no doubt.
Because I got to
Yeah.
think about it, because maybe I'll put $1,000 in the same company. I can tell you what I did do. I actually put $1,000 in a company called Blue Flight, which is in their little Kickstarter campaign or whatever the heck it was. But that's a commercial drone. If we're talking about military, that's a tough one. You know what I'd probably do if I had I'd probably find I thought there was a little fund out there that kind of put the drone companies in all together. I might start with that.
Oh yeah,
But
there
if I
might
had
be
to pick,
you mean like an ETF or a
yeah,
mutual
something,
fund
yeah, like an index kind of thing.
index
But
one.
yeah, but I mean, I wish I'd have done that with AeroVironment like you did, Wayne. The problem with a lot of drone companies is they're not public, so it's hard to put $1,000 into them. At least the ones that are going to give you the 100 bagger or whatever if you want in the future.
Right.
But
Well, AeroVironment is public, but I missed my
yeah,
missed my window. It's too expensive now, so I'll have to wait. I'll have to wait till something happens and it comes way back down. Okay,
it
Shreya,
might be. I'm sorry, I was gonna say it might be interesting to invest in a company like Joby or something like that, whose stock price is only like $7. If you think the AAM market's going to take off, that'd be kind of cool.
yeah, Joby. Yep, it's
Yeah,
publicly traded.
yep. I think they did a SPAC, but yeah. So that's one I would look at.
Okay, Shreya, anything for our LinkedIn questioner?
I don't have a specific company to suggest. I think the person investing themselves has to do a lot of research, but I think a few things to note when you're looking at investment with drone warfare, the rise of SMEs and startups, it's going to be more focused on small drone markets. So if you could look at companies that are producing, developing kamikaze drones, target drones, I think those are the sectors that will pick up very quickly in the next few years. But when it comes to like these medium-sized and large, more specialized drones, I think there's still a lot of time for the emergence of SMEs and startups in that sector. But right now, focus on small drones and definitely focus on target drones and kamikaze drone producers.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah,
know Teledyne FLIR makes this little handheld. I think it's called a nano drone. I think it's
yeah. It's a
the
Black Hornet.
Black Hornet 4, I think is what it's called maybe, but
Yeah,
that one looks
yeah.
pretty good, pretty cool. I think it's one of their hottest sellers too.
Yeah, that was an acquired drone. They acquired that from a company called Prox Dynamics back in the day. I think it's a Norwegian
Ah,
company. So yeah,
okay.
they didn't develop that, but it is a very cool little tool, and even has an IR camera on it that small. I mean, yeah, it fits in the palm of your hand. But
Yeah, I mean
I was
it
gonna,
looks like a kid's toy, but it's actually a
yeah.
military grade,
Well,
drone
the
with an
thing
IR
is,
sensor on.
you can fly it up to somebody a few feet away, and they wouldn't even hear it. It's that small. I
Yeah.
wanted to
And
add something because Shreya made a
yeah, go
good
ahead,
point
Mike.
earlier about AI and MRO. Well, I think that we also and VR and AR. I think that technology also is very important to the actual training and operations of drone warfare in the future, right? So you can use the VR, AR systems to train the operators, and then AI itself can be used for something like the loyal wingman concept, right? Where you have just one crewed aircraft and maybe 5 to 10 other aircraft that are uncrewed, and they all have certain targets, and then they collaborate via AI and whatnot to understand what the most important target is, and if the loyal wingman going out to that target gets taken out, then another one redirects to that. So I think the AI is very important to the swarm mentality of drone
Yes.
use in the future for
Yep.
drone warfare. So that's
Yeah.
another thing, just another thing to talk about with this stuff.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have a drone warfare 2.0 think tank, and we'll talk more about swarm and swarm tactics and
The cool stuff.
some more cool stuff. Well, thank you so much, panel. Mike, thank you. I know you didn't have to be here, but you were. Thank you so much, Shreya. Bye, everybody. Thanks again.